The funeral ended, but the most dangerous message arrived afterward. Welcome to Mystery Case. I am your host, Detective Echo. Write in the comments where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing our audience around the world. Let's open the letter. A letter with bad timing. If a man insists on arranging his own funeral, he ought to have the decency to stay dead afterward. That's what I thought at 10 minutes past 11 on a Tuesday, when Fritz Brenner opened the front door and February air barged into Nero Wolfe's brownstone like it owned the place. I was at my desk in the office, sorting mail and watching Wolfe. He sat in his red leather chair, immovable, turning a page with a finger that looked more suited to pressing grapes than to paper. The book was French, naturally. The silence was the good kind. The kind that meant no clients, no police, and no disturbance to the orchids upstairs. Then Fritz cleared his throat in the hall. In that house, that sound is a fire bell. "Mr. Archie," he called, "a messenger." Wolfe's eyes did not lift, but I knew he heard it. The man could hear a dime think about dropping. Fritz appeared in the doorway with an envelope held between thumb and forefinger as if it might stain. Behind him stood a kid in a cap, cheeks red, shifting his weight the way boys do when they're paid to wait and hate it. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and sealed with black wax. Black wax belongs on medieval plagues. "For Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said. The kid extended a receipt pad. "Need a signature. Special delivery. Paid in advance." I signed and shooed him out. Fritz closed the door with the soft finality of a vault. I brought the envelope to Wolfe's desk, and he let it hover in his line of sight for 2 seconds before speaking. "Place it there," he said, in the tone used for directing furniture. I placed it. He studied the seal as if it were a rare insect. "Black wax," he murmured. "Affectation. Or mourning," I said. "Got a new fan club. Open it, Archie." I slid a letter opener under the flap. The wax cracked with a tiny snap. Inside was a single sheet folded once and a smaller envelope tucked within, also sealed. The handwriting on the outer page was firm, old-fashioned, and expensive. I read aloud, because Wolfe prefers information to suspense. "Mr. Nero Wolfe," it began. "If this letter has reached your hand, then I have been buried. Please do not be tempted to congratulate Providence. I am writing this on the morning of my funeral, which I have arranged to the last lily, but in which I intend to attend only in spirit." Wolfe's brows rose 1 millimeter. "That's his trumpet blast." The letter continued. "You will recall, perhaps unwillingly, our conversation of October 1949, when you declined to act for me because you found my problem self-inflicted. You were correct then, and you would be correct now, yet I ask you to act anyway." "Who is it?" I asked, lowering the page. Wolfe's lips compressed. "Continue." "My name is Albert K. Rask," I read. "I have left an instruction with my attorney, Bernard Riemer, to deliver to you, today, an item that belonged to my first wife. That item must not remain in my house after my burial. If it does, it will ruin a man who does not deserve ruin and spare a woman who does." I whistled. "Charming. He dead?" "According to his assertion," Wolfe said. I read on. "No, the enclosed envelope is not to be opened until Mr. Riemer has placed the item in your custody. This is not melodrama. It is an attempt to correct a calculation I made 20 years ago. If you refuse, burn this letter and forget my name. If you accept, do not leave your house today. You may not be safe outside it." I let the sheet drop to the desk. The smaller envelope sat there like a mouse daring a cat. Wolfe stared at it, mildly displeased, less with the threat than with the inconvenience of being addressed by a dead man. At last he spoke. "Rask," he said, "a financier. Contemptible, yet competent. Competent enough to mail himself from the grave," I said. "You want me to call this lawyer?" Wolfe's eyes shifted to me. and the air thickened the way it does when he's decided something and hasn't yet explained it. Yes, Hagen, no. That clears it up. You will telephone Mr. Riemer, Wolfe said, and you will ascertain whether Mr. Rask is in fact deceased. You will also inquire what item is to be delivered. You will not, however, invite Mr. Riemer to come here. I blinked, but the letter says he's got to place it in your custody. Indeed. And it says don't leave the house. Also indeed. I grinned. Boss, you're going to enjoy this. I can tell. Wolfe's gaze returned to the book. Mr. Rask has finally demonstrated a sense of timing, he said to him. It is atrocious. Fritz drifted in, silent. Lunch will be in 1 hour. Wolfe nodded, untroubled. I picked up the telephone in the dead man's letter. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside the brownstone, the clock had just been nudged off its track. And I had the feeling, one I've learned to trust, that somebody had arranged more than a funeral. I dialed Bernard Riemer's number from the desk phone and got him on the second ring. His voice was crisp and nasal, as if he had been born with a legal pad under his chin. Riemer. Archie Goodwin. For Nero Wolfe. A pause. Yes. I have instructions. Start with the simple part, I said. Albert K. Rask. Is he dead? He was interred at 10 o'clock this morning. Interred is a nice word, I said. Did you see him? I identified the body yesterday at St. Bartholomew's. He died Sunday night. Cause? Heart failure. Fine. Now, your delivery. The letter says you're bringing an item that belonged to his first wife and you're to place it in Mr. Wolfe's custody today. What is it? I'm not at liberty. I glanced at Wolfe. He hadn't moved, but the air said he was listening. Mr. Riemer, I said, Mr. Wolfe doesn't take custody of nameless objects from dead men on faith. Riemer exhaled. It is a small metal case, about 8 inches long, with a combination lock. Mr. Rask called it the Mariette case. Mariette being the first wife? Yes. And you know what's inside? No. Mr. Rask told me only that it contained a correction. Good, I said. How do you propose to deliver it? I will come to West 35th Street at 2 o'clock with the case. I will obtain Mr. Wolfe's signed receipt. No, I said. Mr. Wolfe isn't receiving visitors. Silence, then. Mr. Goodwin, the instructions are explicit. I am to place it in Mr. Wolfe's custody today. If he refuses, the bequest reverts to the estate. A threat dressed as a clause, I said. Wolfe spoke without looking up. Admit him. With conditions. I leaned into the phone. All right, 2 o'clock. You will be admitted and escorted directly to the office. You will not wander. You will not speak to anyone except Mr. Wolfe and me. You will leave when the receipt is signed. That is acceptable, Riemer said, though he made it sound like he was granting a favor. I hung up. Wolfe turned a page. The dead man's timing is atrocious. At least he picked a lawyer to match, I said. You ever hear of Mariette Rask? Wolfe's eyes lifted. I have heard of Mariette. She was not his first wife by chronology. She was his first wife by consequence. That gave the case weight. I put Rask's letter back in its envelope and left the smaller sealed one on the desk where Wolfe could glare at it later. The doorbell rang again, sharp and impatient. Fritz answered, then when a moment later appeared in the doorway with his face arranged into polite disapproval. Inspector Kramer, he announced. Wolfe closed his book. Show him in. Kramer came in looking like February had chewed on him, hat in hand, coat damp, eyes already irritated. He didn't sit until he had decided which chair he disliked least. Wolfe, he said. Goodwin. Rask is dead. So I am informed, Wolfe said. Kramer's head snapped. Informed how? By Mr. Rask, Wolfe said calmly. In a letter. Kramer swore under his breath and dug a folded sheet from his pocket. This came to homicide, he said, tossing it on Wolfe's desk. Special delivery. Dated yesterday. Says if anything happens to an item of his, the police should look at his widow and his partner, Peter Durnell. Says you'll get involved. Then he dies. Wolfe didn't touch the letter, so he didn't need to. His eyes traveled over it as if the paper were transparent. What item? Wolfe asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. A small metal case, Kramer said. Combination lock. He calls it the Mariette case. That made the room narrower. 2 letters, same object, different targets, and Rask conducting it all from under the ground. Kramer leaned forward. Doc says heart failure. Maybe. But when a rich man mails out warnings like he's setting mousetraps after the fact, I don't like it. You expecting that case today? At 2, I said. His attorney. Bernard Riemer. Kramer's mouth tightened. If that thing turns into evidence, you don't tuck it away and argue about dinner. You call me. Wolfe's tone stayed mild. Inspector, if you wish to supervise my conduct, apply for a writ. Kramer pushed up, hands heavy with annoyance. I'll be nearby, he said. Don't make me regret it. He left, taking his damp wool smell with him. I sat and stared at the smaller sealed envelope Rask had tucked inside his letter. It was still unopened. Now it felt less like a mouse and more like a polite grenade. Wolfe watched me. At 2 o'clock, he said, you will observe Mr. Riemer's hands. Gladly. You will also observe your own. I grinned. Worried I'll pick the lock? No, Wolfe said. I'm certain you will want to. He reached for the smaller envelope, then stopped, as if even paper might be baited. Put it in the safe, he ordered. We will not be maneuvered by a corpse. Fritz appeared with a tray of beer for me, warm milk for Wolfe, and the normality of it only made the approaching 2 o'clock feel louder than usual. Though I put the smaller sealed envelope in the wall safe behind the framed photograph of Wolfe with his orchids, spun the dial and checked it twice. If a dead man intended to maneuver us, he would have to do it without the benefit of my curiosity. That didn't make me less curious. Wolfe finished his milk with a look of faint distaste, as if even nourishment were an interruption, and closed his eyes. From 11:30 to 1 he permits no disturbance. From 1 to 2 he permits none at all. The house settled into its disciplined quiet. Fritz moved like a well-trained breeze. I sat at my desk pretending to read a magazine and thinking about metal cases with combination locks. At 5 minutes to 2 I checked the street from the front window. A grey sedan was double-parked. A man stood beside it, glancing at his watch. Oh, he had the posture of someone accustomed to billing by the quarter hour. The bell rang precisely at 2. Fritz admitted Bernard Riemer and escorted him straight back. He was a medium height, thin without fragility, his hair parted with geometrical care. He carried a flat leather briefcase in one hand and an expression in the other. Mr. Wolfe, he said, inclining his head. Mr. Goodwin. Wolfe did not rise. Mr. Riemer, be seated. Riemer chose the red leather chair opposite Wolfe, then reconsidered and shifted to the yellow one, perhaps preferring distance to confrontation. He placed the briefcase on his knees but did not open it. I attended Mr. Rask's funeral this morning, he began. It was well attended. I am not interested in lilies, Wolfe said. Riemer's lips thinned, so he snapped the latches of the briefcase and withdrew a rectangular metal case wrapped in brown paper. He laid it on my desk rather than Wolfe's, which I appreciated. It meant I could see his hands. The case was 8 inches long, perhaps 3 wide, steel with a brushed finish dulled by age. On one end sat a small dial with numbers etched in black. No keyhole. This is the Mariette case, Riemer said. Mr. Rask instructed me to deliver it to you intact and unopened. I am to obtain a signed receipt stating that you accept custody and responsibility. Responsibility for what? I asked. for whatever its contents may entail, Reimer replied evenly. Wolfe's gaze rested on the case as though it were a mildly disappointing specimen of fungi. Did Mr. Rask ever open it in your presence? No. Did he indicate whether anyone else knew the combination? Reimer hesitated half a beat. He stated that 2 persons might know it. Names: his widow, Mrs. Eleanor Rask, and Mr. Peter Durnell, his business partner. I glanced at Wolfe. A widow and a partner. Kramer's letter had mentioned both. Where is the case ordinarily kept? Wolfe asked. In a locked drawer in Mr. Rask's study. Until yesterday. At his instruction, I removed it and kept it in my office safe overnight. Why? I said. Because, Reimer said, Mr. Rask feared that after his death someone would attempt to obtain it before his written directives could be executed. That someone being? I prompted. He did not specify. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. The receipt, Mr. Reimer. Reimer produced a typed document. I read it quickly, and it was as dry as old toast. Acknowledgement of transfer, assumption of custody, no admission regarding contents. I placed it before Wolfe. He signed with a firm, economical motion and passed it back. Reimer stood. My obligation is fulfilled. I would advise caution, Mr. Wolfe. Mr. Rask was not a man who made gestures without consequence. That, Wolfe said, is precisely why I accepted. Reimer inclined his head again and left under Fritz's escort. The door had barely closed when the bell rang once more, sharper this time. I didn't need to look at Wolfe to know he was displeased. 2 visitors in 10 minutes is a riot in that house. Fritz returned with a woman. She was in her early 40s, striking without effort, dressed in black that was too precise to be grief and too deliberate to be accidental. Her eyes were pale gray, and they went first to the metal case on my desk. Mrs. Rask, she said, I assume that is what my husband sent you. Wolfe inclined his head. You assume correctly. She did not sit until Wolfe gestured. When she did, she kept her back straight and her hands folded, as though posing for a portrait entitled Widow in Control. I came directly from the cemetery, she said. Mr. Reimer informed me of Albert's instructions. I wish to make something clear. That case contains documents which, if misinterpreted, could destroy a man's reputation. Which man? I asked. Peter Durnell, she said without blinking. There it was, set on the table like a card. Wolfe's eyes half closed. And if interpreted correctly? He asked. Then they will confirm what I have known for years, she replied. That my husband trusted the wrong person. Her gaze shifted again to the case. Not fear, not grief, calculation. Do you know the combination? Wolfe asked. A pause, almost imperceptible. No, it was too smooth. Wolfe's voice remained mild. Mrs. Rask, I will inform you of any conclusions I reach. Until then, this object will remain unopened. Her composure tightened. You can't mean to delay. I can mean precisely that. She rose, a fraction faster than grace required. Be careful, Mr. Wolfe, she said. Albert enjoyed games, but he rarely played them alone. When she had gone, the room felt charged, as if the metal case emitted a low current. I looked at Wolfe. Widow says it ruins the partner. Partner probably says it ruins the widow. Kramer says call him. And the dead man says don't leave the house. Wolfe's fingers rested lightly on the steel surface. Archie, he said, telephone Mr. Peter Durnell. Invite him here at once. And if he asks why? Tell him, Wolfe said, that his future may depend on whether he knows 3 numbers. I dialed Peter Durnell's office and was told he had not returned from the funeral. I left my name and the message Wolfe dictated. Your future may depend upon whether you know 3 numbers. I added the address and suggested he not delay if he valued suspense. He arrived at 3:20, breathless and unaccompanied, which told me more than if he'd brought a lawyer. He was tall, dark-haired, with a face that had once been easygoing and was now trying to remember how. He came into the office with the look of a man who had spent the day being watched. "You're Wolfe?" he said, as if confirming a rumor. "I am," Wolfe replied. Durnell's gaze found the metal case on my desk and stayed there. Color drained, not theatrically, but like ink diluted with water. "So he did it," he muttered. "Did what?" I asked. "Sent it here." "You recognize the object?" Wolfe said. "Yes." Durnell dragged a hand through his hair. "It was Mariette's. Albert kept it after she died. Wouldn't let anyone touch it." "Do you know the combination?" Wolfe asked. Durnell hesitated, and in that pause I could almost hear numbers marching. "I did," he said finally. "Years ago." "Recite it." He looked from Wolfe to me, then back. 16, 42, 9. Wolfe did not move. "You are certain?" "Yes." "Without reflection?" "I've reflected," Durnell snapped. "For 10 years." Wolfe nodded once. "Archie." I lifted the case. He felt its weight, heavier than paper alone, and turned the dial carefully. 16, 42, 9. The metal clicked, soft but decisive. I lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of folded documents tied with blue ribbon, and beneath them a slim black notebook. No jewels, no currency, no immediate explosion. Just paper, the most lethal material known to civilized men. Durnell closed his eyes briefly. "God help me." Wolfe extended a hand. I passed him the top document. He unfolded it with deliberate care. His eyes moved steadily, without visible reaction. He read the next and the next. "What is it?" Durnell demanded. Wolfe did not answer. He handed the sheaf to me. I scanned the first page. It was a contract, dated 21 years ago, between Albert Rask and Peter Durnell, forming their investment firm. Standard clauses, profit divisions, to liability. The second document was an addendum. My eyebrows went up. "This changes the equity split," I said. "Gives Durnell 60% controlling interest upon the occurrence of a specified contingency." "What contingency?" Durnell asked hoarsely. I flipped to the third page. "Death of Albert Rask." Silence settled, thick and immediate. "That's impossible," Durnell said. "Albert would never—" Wolfe's voice cut gently across him. "The signature is genuine." Durnell leaned over my shoulder. "Yes, it's his," he swallowed. "But I never saw this." "There is more," Wolfe said. The black notebook contained neat columns of figures, dates, initials. Payments made from Rask's personal accounts to a series of shell corporations, then redistributed. Some entries were marked with a single letter. "M. Mariette," I said. Durnell shook his head. "No, that's me. My middle name's Michael." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "These payments span 15 years. They are not trivial." "I never received a dime beyond my share," Durnell said. His voice had lost its earlier edge. Now it held something closer to fear. "Albert handled certain private investments. I told him I didn't want to know details." "An admirable position," Wolfe murmured. "For a man about to inherit 60%. Durnell's fists clenched. "You think I knew about this? That I let him—" "I think nothing yet," Wolfe said. "Mrs. Rask believes these documents will destroy you." Durnell let out a short, bitter laugh. "Eleanor would. She always thought I had too much influence. Albert listened to me." "And Mariette?" Wolfe asked. Durnell's expression shifted. "Mariette was different. She disagreed with some of Albert's ventures. They said they were predatory." Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. "Predatory, a term of moral disapproval." "Call it what you like," Durnell said. "Albert made fortunes by finding companies in trouble and squeezing them. Mariette hated it. And yet, Wolfe said softly. He preserved this case and its contents for 2 decades. I turned another page in the notebook. One entry, dated the week before Mariette's death, had been underlined twice. Beside it, in Rask's tight handwriting, were 3 words. She knows now. A small chill went down my spine. Mariette died how? I asked. Car accident, Durnell said automatically. Then he faltered. At least, that's what we were told. Wolfe's gaze lifted fully now. You doubt it? Durnell looked at the open case as if it were a coffin. Yeah, I doubt everything Albert ever told me. The doorbell rang again. I swore under my breath. Wolfe's eyes flicked toward the sound with open irritation. Fritz appeared. Inspector Kramer, he said, and behind him Kramer's bulk filled the doorway. He took in the open case, the documents in my hand, Durnell's ashen face. I was nearby, he said dryly. Thought I'd check. Wolfe regarded him calmly. Inspector, you arrive at an instructive moment. Kramer stepped forward. That's so? Yes, Wolfe said. We have just opened the Mariette case, and it appears that a man who died of heart failure may have been living for 20 years with a more complicated condition. Kramer shut the door with his heel and moved closer, his eyes sweeping the documents in my hand as if they might try to escape. Complicated how? He demanded. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Financially, morally, possibly criminally. We have before us a contract that transfers controlling interest in a substantial firm upon Mr. Rask's death, and a ledger indicating systematic diversions of funds under initials that may or may not belong to Mr. Durnell. Kramer shot Durnell a look that could have peeled bark. You want to explain that? I've never seen those papers before today, Durnell said, and for once the protest didn't sound rehearsed. Albert handled certain accounts personally. I told him I didn't want the details. Convenient, Kramer said. It may be, Wolfe interjected mildly, that convenience was Mr. Rask's design rather than Mr. Durnell's. Kramer grunted. You saying Rask set him up? I'm saying that a man who arranges for documents to surface on the day of his funeral is not acting impulsively. I handed Kramer the ledger. He flipped through it with less patience than it deserved. These shell outfits, he said. You recognize any of them, Durnell? Durnell shook his head. No. Our firm invested in distressed properties, manufacturing, transport. Not whatever this is. Some of these transfers line up with takeovers your firm made, I said, tapping a page. Right before the squeeze. Durnell stared. Albert told me we'd secured bridge financing, private backers. Wolfe's eyes rested on him. And you accepted that explanation? Yes. Without inquiry. Durnell's jaw tightened. I trusted him. Kramer snorted. Trust. That's expensive. Wolfe shifted his attention to the underlined entry I'd marked earlier. She knows now. Dated 1 week before Mariette Rask's death. Inspector, what do you recall of that accident? Kramer frowned. 20 years ago. Upstate Road, rain. Car went off a curve. Husband said she'd insisted on driving herself back from a charity dinner. No witnesses, no sign of foul play. We filed it. And the car? Wolfe asked. Burned enough to make detail tricky, Kramer said. Why? Wolfe's voice was almost gentle. Because if Mrs. Mariette Rask discovered these financial manipulations, and if she objected, her knowledge constituted a threat that ceased to exist shortly thereafter. Durnell went pale again. You think Albert? I think nothing without evidence, Wolfe said. But Mr. Rask's notation suggests conflict. Kramer looked at the documents again, more carefully. All right. Suppose Rask skimmed funds through shells. Suppose the wife found out. You're hinting he killed her to keep it quiet. That's a long reach, Wolfe. Yes, Wolfe agreed. It is. The room held that admission like a held breath. Wolfe continued, however, consider the present. Mr. Rask writes to the police warning that if anything happens to this case, suspicion should fall upon his widow and his partner. He writes to me suggesting the contents will ruin a man who does not deserve ruin and spare a woman who does. That phrasing is not casual. Kramer's gaze sharpened. You think he's framing someone? I think, Wolfe said, that he is arranging a final allocation of guilt. Durnell's hands were trembling now, as though he tried to still them against his knees. Eleanor hated me, he said quietly. She believed I pushed Albert into aggressive acquisitions. If these papers come out, it looks like I profited twice. Once from the hidden funds and again from the controlling interest clause. Did you? Kramer asked bluntly. No. Can you prove it? Durnell hesitated. Our audited statements will show my compensation. They won't show what Albert did privately. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction, which for him is a lunge. Mr. Durnell, when did you last see Mr. Rask alive? Saturday afternoon, at the office. Describe his demeanor. Normal, irritated about a pending merger. He complained about Eleanor interfering in estate planning. Interfering how? He said she demanded revisions to his will. Kramer's head snapped up. Revisions? Like what? I don't know specifics, Durnell said. But he was angry, said she'd threatened to challenge prior arrangements. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Inspector, has the will been read? Preliminary, Kramer said. Most of it goes to the widow. Standard trusts. Why? Because, Wolfe said, if the controlling interest clause in this contract stands, Mr. Durnell becomes majority owner regardless of the will. That may not align with Mrs. Rask's expectations. Kramer let out a slow breath. So we've got a dead financer who might have killed his first wife, a second wife who may lose influence if this clause holds, and a partner who inherits control but claims ignorance of the dirty money. And, I added, a dead man who made sure all three of you were watching when the box opened. The telephone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. A woman's voice, controlled but tight. This is Eleanor Rask. Has Mr. Durnell arrived? I looked at Durnell, then at Wolfe. He is here, Wolfe said, loud enough for her to hear through the receiver. A brief silence. Good, she said. Then you should know something before you decide what to do with those papers. What is that, Mrs. Rask? Wolfe asked. My husband changed the combination to that case last week. Every eye in the room shifted to the open metal box on Wolfe's desk. And only one other person knew the new numbers, she said. Wolfe did not blink. And who was that, Mrs. Rask? Me, she said. The words settled in the room like dust after a fall. You are certain? Wolfe asked. I stood beside him when he reset it, she replied. Yes, he said the old numbers were compromised. Compromised by whom? By Peter, she said. Durnell was on his feet before she finished the name. That's a lie. Mr. Durnell, Wolfe said without raising his voice, be seated. He remained standing a moment longer, fists clenched, then sank back into the chair as if the cushions had given way beneath him. Mrs. Rask, Wolfe continued, when did this resetting occur? Last Tuesday, in Albert's study. And you recall the new combination? Yes. Kindly recite it. There was the faintest pause. 21, 33, 11. I looked at Wolfe. He inclined his head toward the case. Close it, Archie. I gathered the documents, replaced them precisely as I had found them, lowered the lid, and spun the dial until it locked. The metal clicked again, neutral and patient. Now, Wolfe said, apply Mrs. Rask's numbers. I turned the dial. 21, 33, 11. I pressed the latch. Nothing. I tried again. Slower, the mechanism remained immovable. On the telephone line, Eleanor Rask's breathing sharpened. You're doing it wrong. I'm rarely accused of that, I said. The numbers are correct, she insisted. Mrs. Rask, Wolfe said. "The case opened moments ago with the sequence 16, 42, 9. Mr. Durnell supplied those numbers without hesitation." Silence. Not the brief kind, but the sort that stretches and thins. "That's impossible," she said at last. "On the contrary," Wolfe replied. "It has occurred." Durnell leaned forward, color returning in a surge. "I told you I knew it." "You knew the old combination," she snapped. "Albert changed it." "Evidently," Wolfe said, "he did not. Or if he did, and he did not do so successfully. Mrs. Rask, did you personally test the new numbers?" "I watched him set them." "That was not my question." Another pause. "No." "Then you possess an assumption," Wolfe said, "not a fact." Her composure frayed audibly. "Albert told me Peter had discovered the old combination. He said it wasn't safe." "Discovered how?" Wolfe asked. "I don't know. He didn't elaborate." Durnell shook his head slowly. "He never mentioned any of this to me." "Mrs. Rask," Wolfe said, "did you inform anyone else that the combination had been changed?" "No." "Did you approach Mr. Reamer regarding this matter?" "I asked him whether Albert had altered any security arrangements," she said carefully. "He said he wasn't aware of specifics." Kramer stepped closer to the desk, eyeing the case as if it might confess under pressure. "Us lady," he said. "If the numbers didn't change, why tell us they did?" "Because Albert told me they had," she shot back. "Why would I invent it?" "That," Wolfe said softly, "is the pertinent inquiry." I watched Durnell. His earlier panic had shifted into something steadier. Anger, yes, but also a dawning calculation. If Eleanor had been wrong about the combination, what else might she be wrong about? "Mrs. Rask," Wolfe continued, "when you came here earlier today, you stated that the contents of this case would destroy Mr. Durnell. How did you know that?" "Albert told me," she said. "He said he had protected the firm from Peter's manipulations for years, that if the truth came out, Peter would be exposed." "And yet," Wolfe said, "the documents within suggest the opposite, that Mr. Durnell stands to gain control and that the questionable transactions bear his initial." "Exactly," she exclaimed. "Albert said Peter had arranged them." "Arranged them," Wolfe repeated. "Without your husband's knowledge?" He implied, Wolfe echoed. "Mrs. Rask, your late husband appears to have implied a great deal." Kramer folded his arms. "Wolfe, you think the dead guy fed her a story?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that Mr. Rask distributed narratives as carefully as he distributed funds." I leaned back against my desk. "Boss, if Rask told her he changed the combination and didn't, that means he wanted her to believe something false." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "And if he told her Peter had been manipulating the firm while keeping a contract that hands Peter control, now that's another contradiction." "Yes." Durnell looked from one to the other of us. "Why would he do that?" Wolfe's eyes settled on the closed metal case. "Because," he said, "a man nearing death may seek not merely to settle accounts, but to rebalance resentments." On the telephone, Eleanor Rask's voice dropped lower. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting," Wolfe said, "that your husband may have wished to observe which of you would reach first for what he left behind." "And what do you think I reached for?" she demanded. "For certainty," Wolfe said. "Unfortunately, you were provided with illusion." Kramer grunted. "All right, Wolfe. Where does that leave us?" Wolfe leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. "It leaves us," he said, "with a man who preserved incriminating records for 20 years, yet who misled his wife regarding a simple mechanical fact, and who warned the police in advance of unspecified danger to this case." "And?" I prompted. "And," Wolfe continued, "with the possibility that Mr. Rask's final act was not confession, but provocation." The line remained open, Eleanor Rask listening. In the office, no one moved. "Mrs. Rask," Wolfe said at last, "I advise you to come here. Immediately." "For what purpose?" she asked. "To hear what your husband truly arranged," Wolfe replied. Eleanor Rask arrived within 30 minutes. If she had paused to consider whether it was wise to enter a room containing her husband's partner, a police inspector, and Nero Wolfe in full possession of a locked box, she gave no sign of it. She came in composed, gloved, and pale. Durnell stood as she entered. She did not look at him. Kramer took a position near the door, arms folded, as if to ensure that no one's future escaped down the hallway. I remained at my desk, close to the case. Wolfe inclined his head. "Mrs. Rask, pray be seated." She sat, removing her gloves with deliberate care. "I assume you have reopened it." "Not since our conversation," Wolfe said. "We required your presence." Her gaze flicked to Durnell at last. "You claim the old combination still worked." "It did," he said. "Then Albert lied to me," she said almost to herself. "Or," Wolfe replied, "he told you what would produce a particular reaction." "Which reaction?" she demanded. "Yours." Silence tightened the room. Wolfe gestured to me. "Archie, open the case again." I spun the dial, 16, 42, 9, and lifted the lid. The documents lay as before, blue ribbon neat, notebook beneath. "Mrs. Rask," Wolfe said, "you believe these papers would incriminate Mr. Durnell?" "Yes. On what basis?" "Albert told me he had discovered discrepancies in Peter's management. He said he had kept evidence in that case. He implied Peter was siphoning funds." "And did you ever see such evidence?" "No, Albert refused to show me." Wolfe nodded. "Yet you accepted his characterization." "Why wouldn't I?" she shot back. "Peter benefited from every aggressive move Albert made." Durnell's jaw tightened. "We built that firm together." "And Mariette opposed it," Eleanor said coldly. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "You knew Mariette?" "I met her once," Eleanor said. "She disapproved of Albert's work. She said he treated companies like carcasses." "And did she ever accuse Mr. Durnell of misconduct?" "Not in my presence." Wolfe turned to Durnell. "Did Mr. Rask ever confront you regarding these alleged discrepancies?" "Never," Durnell said. "We argued about strategy, yes. But he never accused me of theft." Wolfe rested his fingertips together. "Inspector, has there been any indication that Mr. Rask's death was not natural?" Kramer shook his head. "Medical examiner says heart failure. No signs of struggle. No toxins preliminarily. We're running full panels because of the letters, but nothing yet." "Then," Wolfe said, "we are confronted not with a fresh murder, but with an old one, or none at all, and a dead man's architecture of suspicion." Eleanor stiffened. "Old murder?" Wolfe's gaze moved to the underlined entry in the notebook. She knows now. Dated shortly before Mariette Rask's fatal accident. "Mrs. Rask, did your husband ever speak of guilt regarding his first wife?" Her composure faltered for the first time. "No." "Did he ever express regret?" "He rarely expressed anything." Durnell leaned forward. "Wolfe, are you saying Albert killed Mariette?" "I'm saying," Wolfe replied, "that he recorded a moment of crisis immediately preceding her death. Whether that crisis culminated in violence remains unproven." Kramer shifted his weight. "If you're reopening a 20-year-old accident, you'd better have more than a diary note." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "And I do not. Not yet." He fixed Eleanor with a steady look. "However, we do possess something more immediate. Your husband informed you that he changed the combination to this case." "He did not. He informed you that Mr. Durnell was diverting funds. The documents suggest that if funds were diverted, they were controlled by Mr. Rask himself." Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap. "You think he lied to me deliberately?" "Yes." "Why?" Wolfe's voice was quiet. "Because he wished to see what you would do." Her eyes flashed. What do you mean? When you learned of his death, Wolfe said, what was your first concern? She hesitated. The estate. Specifically, the firm, control, stability. And Mr. Donnell's role? I intended to limit it, she said. Albert had said Peter could not be trusted. And if these documents had surfaced publicly? Wolfe asked. They would have justified removing him. Donnell let out a sharp breath. So that was it. Eleanor turned on him. You would have done the same to me. No, he said, and for once there was no anger in it. I wouldn't. Wolfe raised a hand. Enough. Consider this. Mr. Rask arranges for the case to come here. He alerts the police to potential danger from both widow and partner. He ensures that each of you believes the other capable of betrayal. He leaves a contract granting control to Mr. Durnell, yet tells you, Mrs. Rask, that Mr. Durnell is corrupt. Kramer frowned. He's setting them against each other. Yes, Wolfe said, posthumously. Eleanor's voice was barely audible. Why would he want that? Wolfe's eyes rested on her, unblinking. Perhaps because he suspected that one of you intended to move against him before he died. The words hung in the air like a blade. Kramer straightened. Now we're getting somewhere. Donnell stared at Eleanor. She met his gaze, and something raw passed between them. Fear, accusation, calculation. Mrs. Rask, Wolfe said gently. Did you urge your husband to alter his will last week? Yes. In whose favor? My own, she said. And at whose expense? Donnell's name did not need to be spoken. Wolfe nodded once. Then it is possible that Mr. Rask, perceiving pressure from you, sought to protect Mr. Durnell, or to punish you, or both. Eleanor rose abruptly. I did not kill my husband. No one has accused you of that, Wolfe said. Kramer cleared his throat. Not yet. Wolfe ignored him. Mrs. Rask, until the medical findings are complete, we proceed on the assumption that Mr. Rask died naturally. But his final arrangements suggest he feared interference with this case. Interference how? I asked. Wolfe's gaze returned to the metal box. By substitution, he said. By removal, or by destruction. Every eye in the room dropped to the documents. And, Wolfe continued softly, we have not yet established whether what we are reading is precisely what Mr. Rask intended us to see. The silence after Wolfe's remark was not confusion, it was recalculation. Everyone in the room began, in his or her own way, to reconsider the metal case, not as evidence, but as an instrument. Kramer broke first. You saying the papers could be fake? I'm saying, Wolfe replied, that we have accepted them at face value because they were found in a locked container associated with a dead man's final instructions. That is an assumption. I leaned over the desk. The signatures looked genuine, the papers aged. Yes, Wolfe said. No, but authenticity of material does not guarantee authenticity of arrangement. Eleanor Rask stared at the blue ribbon as if it might writhe. Albert kept that case in his study for years, she said. No one touched it. No one? Wolfe asked mildly. She hesitated. He alone had the key to the drawer. And yet, Wolfe said, you believed the combination had been changed. She flinched. Donnell spoke, more slowly now. Wolfe, if the contract is real, and it gives me controlling interest, why would Albert tell Eleanor I was corrupt? Why risk turning her against me? To test her, Wolfe said. Test her for what? For impatience, Wolfe replied. For ambition. For fear. Kramer frowned. Ah, you think he suspected she'd try something? Yes. Like what? Like accelerating an outcome that was already inevitable. The word inevitable settled heavily. Eleanor's voice sharpened. You're implying that I hastened my husband's death. I imply nothing, Wolfe said. I examine incentives. Kramer turned to her. Did you? Her face went white. No. Did you encourage him to change his diet? His medication? No. Did you argue with him Saturday? She looked away. Yes. About the will? Yes. Donnell exhaled slowly. Albert told me he'd never felt better, he said. Said he intended to outlive us both. Wolfe's eyes half closed. Men who anticipate long life rarely orchestrate elaborate posthumous dramas. Kramer nodded reluctantly. Medical examiner said his heart was enlarged. Long-term condition? Did he know? Wolfe asked. Kramer shrugged. Hard to say. Eleanor sank back into her chair. He had chest pains last month, she admitted. The doctor prescribed rest. Albert refused. Did he tell you the prognosis? Wolfe asked. No, he said it was minor. Wolfe's fingers drummed once on the desk. It is conceivable, he said, that Mr. Rask was aware of a serious cardiac condition and chose to conceal it. Why? I asked. To create leverage, Wolfe said. A dying man possesses a unique advantage. He can arrange consequences without enduring them. Kramer looked at the case again. All right. Suppose he knew he was dying. Suppose he wanted to see which of these two would make a move. What move? Interference with this case, Wolfe said. If either party believed its contents damaging, so the temptation to alter or destroy them would be strong. Donnell stiffened. I never touched it. Eleanor's chin lifted. Nor did I. Wolfe nodded. Yet both of you believed it dangerous. To different targets. I thought back. Mrs. Rask, when you came here earlier, you urged immediate action. You did not ask to examine the papers yourself. I trusted Mr. Wolfe to see the truth, she said. Did you? I asked. Her eyes flashed. I expected him to confirm what Albert told me. Wolfe inclined his head slightly. Precisely. Kramer's brow furrowed. Wolfe, you're circling something. Yes. Then land. Wolfe leaned forward, massive and immovable. The controlling interest clause in this contract benefits Mr. Donnell. The ledger implicates him through initials. Mrs. Rask was told the combination had changed and that Mr. Donnell was untrustworthy. Mr. Donnell was not told of the clause, nor of the alleged suspicions. He paused. Each was given partial information, incompatible information. Donnell's voice was low. Albert liked control. Indeed, Wolfe said. He controlled capital, companies, reputations. Why not control memory? Eleanor's composure cracked. Are you saying he invented Peter's corruption? I'm saying, Wolfe replied, that the ledger entries are ambiguous. The initial M may denote Mr. Donnell or Mariette or another entity entirely. The contract may be genuine, but its retention in this case suggests it was meant to be found. Kramer scratched his jaw. If Rask wanted Donnell in control, why not just amend the will cleanly? Because, Wolfe said, a clean amendment would be visible, and this arrangement requires revelation. Revelation to who? I asked. To those present, Wolfe said. The room tightened again. You mean us? Donnell said. Yes. Kramer looked from one face to another. You think he wanted a showdown? I think, Wolfe said, he wished to expose the inclinations of those closest to him. Eleanor's hands trembled now despite her effort to still them. You're wrong, she whispered. Albert would not gamble like that. Wolfe regarded her steadily. Mrs. Rask, did you ever discuss your husband's health with Mr. Reamer? She hesitated too long. Yes, she said at last. When? Last Wednesday. And what was said? That Albert should finalize certain documents quickly, she replied, in case his condition worsened. Kramer's eyes narrowed. So he knew. Possibly, Wolfe said. But if he knew his death was imminent, he may have decided to orchestrate one final experiment. Donnell leaned back as if struck, to see which of us would betray the other. Or, Wolfe said softly, to ensure that neither could. Silence followed that, heavy and unresolved. Kramer finally spoke. Wolfe, if there's no murder, what's the crime? Wolfe's gaze returned to the open case, to the papers resting within like dormant charges. The crime, he said, may not lie in what has occurred, but in what was intended. The room stayed quiet, long enough for the ticking of the office clock to become a participant. Kramer's frown deepened. He dislikes crimes that arrive wrapped in philosophy. All right, he said. Spell it out. Wolfe's eyes moved from Eleanor to Durnell and back again. Mr. Rask created a scenario in which each of you believed the other dangerous. He ensured that a locked container, apparently decisive, would be delivered into neutral custody. He warned the police of possible interference. He told his wife the combination had changed. It had not. He allowed his partner to retain knowledge of the original numbers. Durnell swallowed. So he knew I could open it. Yes. And he knew Eleanor would think I couldn't. Yes. Eleanor's voice was tight. What does that prove? That he anticipated conflict, Wolfe said. The question is whether he anticipated it before or after his death. Kramer's head jerked. You think somebody tried to get at that case already? Wolfe nodded once. Inspector, when Mr. Reamer removed the case from Mr. Rask's study, was anyone else present? I'll have to ask him, Kramer said. Why? Because, Wolfe replied, if Mr. Rask wished to test whether either party would tamper with the contents, he would need an opportunity for them to attempt it. Eleanor stiffened. I never touched it. I did not accuse you, Wolfe said, but you believed the combination had been altered. Therefore, if you had sought to open it, you would have required assistance. Her gaze flickered, briefly, but enough. Durnell saw it. You tried, he said softly. No, she snapped. You must not lie, Wolfe said almost gently. It impedes efficiency. Her composure fractured. I went into the study last Wednesday evening, she said, after Albert told me he'd changed the combination. Kramer leaned forward. Did you try it? Yes. With the old numbers? Yes. And? It opened. The admission hung in the air like a confession of something more than curiosity. Durnell stared at her. You told us it had changed. Because that's what he said, she cried. I thought he was deceiving me, or testing me. I needed to know what was inside. And what did you find? Wolfe asked. Her breathing was uneven now. Documents, the contract, the notebook. Exactly as we found them today. Yes. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Did you remove anything? No. Did you add anything? No. Kramer's voice cut in. Did Rask know you'd opened it? She hesitated again. He came into the study while I was still there. And? He looked at the open case, she said faintly, and he smiled. No one spoke for a moment. What did he say? Wolfe asked. He said, curiosity is expensive, Eleanor. Then he closed it himself and reset the dial. With the same numbers? Wolfe asked. I don't know, she whispered. I assumed he changed them. But you never tested that assumption, Wolfe said. No. Durnell's voice was low and incredulous. So he caught you? Yes. And he let you think you'd failed? She turned on him. And you? You knew the combination for years. I never opened it, he said. Not even once? Kramer asked. Durnell's jaw tightened. Not after Mariette died. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. You opened it before her death? Yes, Durnell said quietly. She asked me to. The room shifted. Explain, Wolfe said. Mariette believed Albert was hiding something, Durnell said. She'd seen irregular transfers. Now she found the case key in his desk and made me open it. And what was inside then? Wolfe asked. The same contract, Durnell said. And a thinner version of the notebook. Fewer entries. Did she confront Mr. Rask? Yes. When? The night before she drove upstate. Kramer's face hardened. And the next day she's dead. Durnell nodded once. She told me if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be an accident. Eleanor stared at him, shock overtaking calculation. You never told me that. You never asked, he said. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, they were steady and cold. Inspector, he said, we have progressed. Yeah, Kramer muttered. Back 20 years. Forward as well, Wolfe said. Mr. Rask caught his second wife examining the case last week, but he knew his partner had once opened it at his first wife's request. He knew both had reason to distrust him. He knew his heart was failing. And I prompted. And he chose not to change the combination, Wolfe said. He chose not to remove the incriminating contract. He chose to preserve evidence of possible misconduct and to distribute contradictory narratives. Kramer folded his arms again. You think he wanted this mess? Yes, Wolfe said, but not merely for spectacle. For what then? Eleanor asked, her voice thin. Wolfe's gaze rested on her. For leverage. Leverage over whom? Durnell demanded. Over you both, Wolfe replied. A dying man may fear not murder, but erasure. If Mr. Rask believed either of you might seek to nullify his arrangements, financial or reputational, he ensured that any such attempt would ignite scrutiny. Kramer nodded slowly. So if she'd destroyed the case, or he had, we'd all be looking hard. Yes. And since neither did, Kramer said, we're still looking. Wolfe inclined his head. Exactly. Eleanor's shoulders sagged. Albert turned us into suspects against each other. No, Wolfe said quietly. He revealed that you already were. The clock ticked again, steady and indifferent. And now? Kramer asked. Wolfe's eyes moved to the ledger, to the underlined words. She knows now. Now, he said, we must determine whether Mariette Rask's knowledge ended in accident or in design. Kramer shifted his weight, impatience wrestling with interest. 20 years is a long time to dig up, he said. Evidence dries out. Motives do not, Wolfe replied. Durnell leaned forward, elbows on his knees. If you're suggesting Albert killed Mariette, why preserve evidence that could point back to him? Because, Wolfe said, the evidence does not point cleanly. It implicates you as easily as him. Durnell's mouth tightened. Wolfe continued, consider the structure. A contract granting you control upon his death, a ledger of questionable transfers, marked with an ambiguous initial, a notation, she knows now, before her fatal accident. If these papers surface without context, suspicion diffuses. It does not concentrate. Kramer nodded slowly. So even if we reopened Mariette's death, we'd be looking at both of them. Yes, Wolfe said. Mr. Rask insured himself against posthumous certainty. Eleanor's voice was low. You're saying he arranged an alibi that would survive him. I am saying, Wolfe replied, that he arranged doubt. The word settled heavily. Durnell looked at the ledger again. Mariette asked me to open the case because she'd traced certain transfers, he said. She believed Albert was siphoning funds into entities that preyed on the companies we acquired, asset stripping beyond what we'd agreed. Did you confront him? Wolfe asked. No, she did. And you allowed her to do so alone? Durnell winced. Yes. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Why? Because I thought she was exaggerating. Albert was ruthless, but not reckless. And the next day she was dead, Wolfe said. Kramer exhaled. Car goes off a wet curve. No witnesses. Husband says she was upset. She was, Durnell said quietly. But not unbalanced. Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the arm of his chair. Inspector, Is the original accident file accessible? It's archived, Kramer said. We can pull it. Do so? Wolfe said. Specifically, I wish to know whether the brake lines were examined. Kramer frowned. Standard procedure. Was less rigorous 20 years ago, Wolfe interrupted, particularly when the victim was presumed at fault. Eleanor's breath caught. Albert said the road was slick. Roads are often slick, Wolfe said. Brake lines are less so. The room tightened again. Kramer moved toward the door. I'll have the file sent over, but don't expect miracles. I expect clarity, Wolfe said. When Kramer had gone, the air seemed thinner. Eleanor stood abruptly. If Albert killed Mariette, if, Wolfe said, then everything he told me was poisoned. Yes, Wolfe agreed. Donnell rose as well. Wolfe, if you find proof, I will inform the authorities, Wolfe said. Justice does not expire. Donnell's eyes met Eleanor's. The hostility between them had shifted, replaced by something more complex. Shared manipulation. Albert played us, Donnell said. Yes, Wolfe said, but you each supplied the pieces. Eleanor straightened. What do you mean? You both desired control, Wolfe said. You, Mrs. Rask, through the will. You, Mr. Donnell, through expansion. Mr. Rask exploited that desire. He did not create it. Neither answered. The doorbell rang again. Fritz admitted a uniformed officer carrying a thick envelope. Kramer followed, already scanning the contents. Preliminary file, he said, then dropping it onto my desk. Photos, reports, witness statements. I spread the photographs. Grainy images of a twisted sedan against a tree, rain-slick pavement, a dark smear that might have been oil, or nothing. Wolfe did not approach. He never does. He watched as I examined the pages. Brake lines were noted as compromised due to impact, I read. No prior mechanical inspection recorded. Convenient, Kramer muttered. Wait, I said, turning another page. Here's a mechanic's preliminary note. It says, possible pre-impact weakening, further analysis recommended. And, Wolfe prompted, it's stamped no action required. I finished. Kramer's jaw hardened. Signed by, I read the name, Albert K. Rask. Silence fell like a verdict. He signed off on the dismissal. Kramer said slowly. Claimed mechanical damage was impact-related. Eleanor swayed slightly. He told me the investigation was routine. Durnell's face had gone gray. He handled it personally. Wolfe's voice was calm, almost gentle. Inspector, would it have been within Mr. Rask's influence to discourage further inquiry? Money talks, Kramer said grimly. And the ledger, Wolfe continued, indicates access to funds that would facilitate such persuasion. Eleanor sank back into her chair. Then he killed her, she whispered. Wolfe did not nod. He ensured that doubt would shield him. He preserved documents implicating his partner. He later misled his second wife regarding those same documents. He arranged for them to surface only after his death. Kramer looked at the photographs again. We'll reopen it. Yes, Wolfe said. Donnell's voice was strained. Why tell us now? Why not destroy the evidence? Because, Wolfe said, Mr. Rask required witnesses to his own cleverness. He wanted you both to know he had outmaneuvered you. Eleanor covered her face briefly. All these years. Wolfe's gaze rested on the closed metal case. The letter that arrived after the funeral was not confession, he said. It was exhibition. Kramer gathered the file. I'll get warrants. We'll see what's left after 20 years. When he left again, the room felt altered. Less charged, more resolved. Donnell looked at Wolfe. And the firm? That, Wolfe said, is for the living to settle. Eleanor rose slowly. Albert thought he controlled everything, she said. Wolfe inclined his head. He controlled much, but not memory, not entirely. She left without another word. Donnell lingered a moment. "Thank you," he said quietly. Wolfe did not respond. He was already reaching for the telephone to instruct Fritz regarding dinner. When the door closed and the house regained its accustomed silence, I looked at the metal case, now inert and ordinary. "Boss," I said, "for a man who never left his chair, you just reopened a grave." Wolfe adjusted himself in the red leather, eyes half closed. "Archie," he said, "a man may arrange his funeral. He may even script his reputation. But if he leaves a ledger behind, he should not be surprised when someone reads it." Upstairs, the orchids waited. Downstairs, dinner would be punctual. And somewhere beyond the brownstone, the past was being examined under brighter light than Albert K. Rask had anticipated. Morning light in the brownstone is different after a grave has been reopened. And it doesn't come in brighter, it comes in sharper. The house had returned to its ritual. Orchids at 9, beer at 11, lunch at 1. But there was an undercurrent running through it, as if the past were clearing its throat in another borough. Kramer called at 10:30. "They found something," he said without preamble. Wolfe did not ask what. He waited. "Original accident report had an addendum," Kramer continued. "Mechanic noted scoring on the inside of the left rear brake line. Could have been wear. Could have been deliberate abrasion. Recommendation was for metallurgical analysis. Rask signed off. No further action." "And the vehicle?" Wolfe asked. "Junked within 48 hours. At Rask's instruction." Wolfe's lids lowered a fraction. "Of course." "We also found a payment," Kramer said, "from one of those shell outfits in the ledger, to the mechanic, 2 weeks after the accident." The air in the room shifted, not violently but decisively. "Amount?" Wolfe asked. "Enough," Kramer said. "We're bringing the mechanic in. He's retired, says he always thought something was off but figured the husband knew best." "Thank you, Inspector," Wolfe said. "Kindly inform me when you secure a statement." He replaced the receiver gently. I let out a breath. "That's it, then." "It is sufficient," Wolfe said. "Legal certainty may prove elusive, but moral certainty is achieved." The bell rang at noon. Fritz admitted Peter Donnell first. He looked as if he had not slept, but there was steadiness in him now, anger redirected into purpose. "You heard?" he asked. "Yes," Wolfe said. Donnell nodded once. Kramer called. "They're reopening the case formally." "And the firm?" Wolfe asked. "I've called a board meeting," Donnell said. "Full disclosure about the ledger, about the contract." "Bold," I said. "Necessary," he replied. "Albert built the firm on leverage. I won't." There was a knock behind him. Eleanor Rask entered without waiting to be announced. She wore grey today instead of black. Not mourning, transition. "I assume you know," she said. "Yes," Wolfe replied. She stood before his desk, not sitting this time. "I wanted to hear it from you." "Mr. Rask bribed the mechanic to suppress further analysis of the brake line," Wolfe said. "Funds traceable to his private accounts. The timing corresponds with the accident." Her face did not crumble. It hardened. "I confronted him about the will," she said quietly. "Last week. And I told him I would not spend my life defending a man who treated people as instruments." "And he responded?" Wolfe asked. "He laughed," she said. "Said everyone is an instrument if played correctly." Wolfe inclined his head. "An opinion now under review." Donnell looked at her. "He used us both." "Yes," she said. There was no heat in it now, only acknowledgement. Wolfe folded his hands. Mr. Rask's final arrangement was consistent with his life. He distributed partial truths to maintain dominance. He preserved documents that would diffuse suspicion. He ensured that, even in death, you would scrutinize each other before him. Eleanor's voice was steady. He wanted to be the last intelligence in the room. Yes, Wolfe said. He miscalculated. How? She asked. He assumed, Wolfe replied. Just that you would remain adversaries. Silence followed. Durnell spoke first. I've instructed our attorneys to void the controlling interest clause. It was never activated through proper channels. We'll restructure. Shared oversight. Transparent accounting. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. You're relinquishing control? I'm relinquishing secrecy, he said. Wolfe nodded faintly. An improvement. Eleanor exhaled. And the ledger? Disclosed, Durnell said. To the board, to the auditors. If there are liabilities, we address them. She studied him, measuring. Then she turned back to Wolfe. You said he revealed what we already were, she said. Ambitious. Suspicious. Yes. And what are we now? Wolfe's gaze was steady. In possession of the truth. Kramer arrived shortly after 1, heavy and satisfied. Mechanics talking, he said. Says Rask suggested the scoring could have happened during towing, slipped him an envelope to avoid embarrassing speculation. We've got bank records. It's thin for murder after 20 years, but it's obstruction at least. We'll see what the DA says. Mariette Rask will not be entirely erased, Wolfe said. No, Kramer agreed. He glanced at Eleanor and Durnell. You two planning to sue each other? No, Durnell said. Eleanor shook her head. No. Kramer snorted softly. Then Rask didn't win completely. When they had all gone, the office felt large again. I closed the metal case and slid it across the desk. Souvenir? I asked. No, Wolfe said. Return it to Mr. Reimer. It has served its purpose. I carried it to the hall table for Fritz to arrange pickup. Back in the office, Wolfe had opened a book but was not reading. Boss, I said, settling into my chair, you ever think about arranging your own funeral? He shot me a look of pure distaste. I have no intention of attending. Rask did, I said. In a way. Yes, Wolfe agreed. He sought applause from the grave. And got a subpoena instead. Wolfe's lips moved a fraction. Justice, he said, is rarely theatrical. It is merely persistent. Upstairs, the orchids would be waiting for him at 4. Downstairs, lunch would be punctual, and dinner inevitable. The brownstone had been disturbed and had absorbed it. I thought about Mariette Rask, about a wet curve on an upstate road and a note in a ledger. She knows now. She had known, and it had cost her. 20 years later, someone had read the rest of the line. Archie, Wolfe said, closing his book at last, says when a man believes himself omniscient, he often forgets that paper endures. Yes, sir, I said. And so, he added, rising slightly in his chair as if concluding an argument with the universe, does appetite. Fritz announced lunch. The case was closed. The grave was open. And in the quiet of West 35th Street, Nero Wolfe resumed the only control he had ever trusted, the arrangement of his own table.